5 years seems like a long time when every moment is spent pursuing a future that was never truly mine. My name is Marcus Hale, and for what seems like an eternity, my whole existence revolved around a single purpose: to make sure that my wife Sienna could realize her ambitions. Behind the wheel of that dilapidated delivery van, I prayed silently into every muscle ache and sleepless night. I would spend my mornings stacking pallets in icy warehouses before the forklifts even started, beeped non-stop, before clocking out just in time to pick up a stale meal and begin my evening delivery work. Parcels, groceries, pizza, Amazon, you name it. I dropped it off, grinning wearily. But that grin hardly concealed the fact that I was on the verge of losing it. Every time I staggered through the door at 3 in the morning, Sienna would be there. She was snuggled up on the couch in our small apartment, her nursing textbooks strewn about her like a fan. She would murmur, "Just a little longer, baby," and blink up at me with the same tiredness. I loved those words, kissed them into my mind. I wrapped the shawl across her forehead, reminding myself that love was judged by sacrifice, not comfort. I observed her struggle to concentrate while having migraines and staying up late before tests to combat the persistent anxiety that she felt. Anxiety that made her believe she was inadequate. And thank God I admired her for it. I didn't fully recognize the warning signs, though, and I choked up. The way her eyes and laughter no longer filled the room like they once did, the space between us causing stress. Occasionally, it ran off when I told her, "I love you." She stopped asking about my day, and I assumed we were just tired from everything. Every time she sobbed about failing a practice exam or doubting herself, we were exhausted and overworked, climbing that steep hill together. I remember one night more clearly than the rest. I held her closer and worked harder to provide a foundation she could stand on. Unlike others, she screamed and jumped into my arms the night she received her acceptance letter to the nursing program. "We succeeded," she exclaimed, and suddenly I believed it. Her happiness was so overwhelming that I forgot how heavy my own chest felt. The truth was, we weren't a team. I was an idiot, and every dollar I earned, every sacrifice I made, went toward her schooling books, lab coats, and clinical supplies. Meanwhile, I wore shoes with holes in them and thought of a fancy supper as gas money for her hospital rotations. I told myself it wouldn't matter if I added bacon to a drive-through cheeseburger because it would all be worth it in the end, when we could look back at the hardship and laugh at the better life we had bled together to build. That was the dream, right? It was supposed to help her grow so we could both succeed. But I didn't understand. I was too naive, too gullible, and too in love to see that, in her perspective, the finish line wasn't the same for both of us. I was the training wheels she was eager to get rid of, and when I realized it, it was too late. All of the midnight forehead kisses and whispered vows weren't enough. The transaction had a hidden expiration date, and I wouldn't even know when it was due. Hope is a terrible thing. It makes you oblivious to the times when the people you care about are already dismantling themselves. I stood there, smiling foolishly, waiting for a hand that would never come. 5 years, thinking I was creating a dream for both of us, but really, I was just building a life that only fit one of us. I carried that hope, like a fool carrying a lullaby, never checking the winning lottery ticket that would have saved me. When the data were released, the paper was worthless. I wish I could say I saw it coming, but I didn't. I felt it when she flinched at the mention of the future or when her embraces felt empty. But love blinds you. And it wasn't the kind of blind where you can't see, but the kind where everything around you shines so brightly that you miss the cracks growing beneath you. And by the time I came to terms with the reality, Sienna had already decided that the life we had built together was a stepping stone. I was the idiot still waiting for a hand that would never come. I walked into that apartment, exhausted after a night shift, roses in hand, ready to congratulate her. But when I opened the door, everything was too motionless. The champagne bottle sat on the kitchen table next to a neat pile of papers, glinting in the sunlight like a trap. She stood there in her immaculate white coat, looking radiant, representing everything we could have been. For a moment I grinned, thinking this was it. But then she turned, and the freedom in her face hit me like a cold wave. "You made it," she whispered, pouring herself a glass of champagne. I placed the flowers on the counter, feeling a wave of discomfort. I grabbed the files, feeling frantic, knowing what was inside them even before I read it: the immediate divorce decree, property partition, no children, no assets, just the damaged truck and the used furnishings we bought when we were foolish, broke, and deeply in love. I looked up at her, silently begging for an explanation or a glimpse of the woman I had sacrificed everything for. She smiled, widened her grin, and clinked her glass against mine. I need to grow without dead weight holding me back. I stood there, not arguing, because I agreed with her, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to drag her back. I stood there, in my warehouse uniform, boots still on my feet, and I understood that whatever I said would just highlight how much I had become the burden. Love hadn't died. It had been systematically buried, replaced by her ambition, her freedom, and the life I no longer fit into. I signed the papers, no hesitation, just the harsh scratch of a pen on paper. Behind me, I heard a sarcastic giggle. I turned and saw Rachel, her best friend, leaning in the doorway with a glass of champagne. "Cheers," she said, her eyes gleaming. I walked out, never looking back. The laughter and the indifference stung worse than anything. I got into my truck, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. I drove, 1 mile at a time, letting the distance grow between the man I had been and the one I was becoming. I was finally free, but at the cost of everything I had built. And though I didn't know it then, that night, in that moment, I started to rebuild. Ashwood Creek. Whole healing didn't give a damn about who I used to be. It simply existed in a calm, steady manner without requiring any explanations or penetrations. And perhaps that was all I needed at the moment. A place where I could be myself without acting. A place where I could at last recollect. The route behind me was blocked. Marcus Hale was who he was before love and sorrow turned him into someone he hardly recognized. Though it didn't happen overnight, the road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, it was mine. The sense of inclusion. It was like seeing a sunrise slowly appear on the horizon, initially nearly imperceptible. However, as it warmed your skin, Ashwood Creek, with its worn storefronts and peeling paint, became the background of a life that I was obstinately and silently creating. I was no longer Marcus Hale, the guy who was abandoned. I wasn't really anyone, and I suddenly felt free. So I purchased a collapsing old house just outside of town, with a disintegrating porch and ivy creeping up the sides as if it were being reclaimed by nature. The front steps were rotted, the roof leaked when it rained, and the building was gradually absorbed by nature. Most people would have chuckled and passed by, but as I stood there holding the keys, I realized that there was potential. It was mine. I spent every free hour repairing it, rebuilding the floorboards and caulking leaks because it had to be mine to be flawless. Removing scrap wood from construction sites, I felt like I was taking back a piece of myself with each nail I drove into place. The locals began to observe me, not in the invasive urban manner, but more in the way of small towns, where a nod at the grocery store meant that Gus connected me to some folks in the VFW hall. Soon, I was lending a hand. Before the first snowfall, we worked on weekend projects like mending fences, constructing wheelchair ramps, and transporting firewood. It wasn't glitzy. It wasn't the life I had imagined when Sienna and I spent late nights planning our future. But honestly, it was so firm beneath my boots that there was no space for the type of treachery I had abandoned. And then there was Delilah, whom I met on a steamy Tuesday afternoon. I was repairing the porch, On a day when the air clung to your skin and the clouds hung low, as if they were too exhausted to rain.